Are you ready for more reading shenanigans? Yes? Good. Now, this book in particular I'm going to talk about, as you've seen probably by the title, most of you have probably heard of / read or watched movie of some sort of some kind or other, so I almost don't need to say, if you want to know what this book is about, go look it up yourself. But I'm going to do that anyway, which I've just done. This is my first time reading Lord of the Rings. I only just did this probably like, a year or two ago for the first time. So sue me. I also have never in my life seen the movies, don't care to, but I did read the book. So here is my review. Again, I'm reading from the review, already written and already done for this, blog post and whatever. So here it is. Here's the information. Okay? First time looking at a Tolkien book. I know, don't shoot the messenger, especially considering that I finally did sit down and read the giant book that was The Fellowship of the Ring, which is the book one. I honestly went into this reading this thinking I wouldn't like it. The bits and pieces of ads that I'd seen in the movies made me really unsure. However, I am glad I finally took the plunge because it was actually pretty good. Now, I do know Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were friends. They were friends. And so that's, I think, probably why I really decided to read it. Because they were friends. And I was like, it's probably fine. The story is actually broken into 2 sections, in my view. An unknown journey in the first part with just hobbits as they head off to their unknown, into the unknown. Sorry. And then a purposed quest with lots of new companions that are all very different and have a much higher level of understanding. Now, I will say, there's probably people who have just dissected this to death. This is just my generic thoughts as a person who read this. I'm not trying to add literary critique and blah, 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 blah. It's just what I noticed, okay? High level of understanding. This was somewhat annoying because we shift quite drastically. However, I will say the first half was a little less action-packed and a little more info was provided. When we get to the second half, we also get more action, but a few more characters to try and keep track of, which was challenging for me at times. Those aren't Mary or John names either, and it was very difficult for me to recall who everybody was. There was a lot. There's actually loads of info dumping in this book, but Tolkien made it work for me, especially in the beginning of the version I listened to in audiobook form, which gave some insight into the Hobbit stuff. I had not read the prequel book, if you will, so this was a great way to get the relevant and some not relevant information that I missed out on. Yeah, that was really helpful. Yeah, the audiobook that I listened to was just like, here's some basic information about hobbits if you haven't read the first book. That was useful. I will say the themes of good versus evil and power corrupting were very well inserted and woven throughout. There were some interesting moments and definitely a consensus that evil is bad. Fancy that? A lot of the books, particularly fantasy, that we are given right now, we seem to focus more on the villains and trying to give them an understandable reason for being the bad guy. To me, this is silly, and I would much rather leave them in the villain category for villain's sake. Sometimes it's good to have a redeemable villain, I will say, but if the goal is not to have them realize what they did was wrong, let's leave them firmly in the bad guy camp and move on with our lives. Very obvious lines were drawn in this book, which is something I think we need to take hold of and continue writing in terms of the good versus evil. Good beats evil in this book. It may not win every battle every day in real life, but that's the point of a story. Good gets to win. Evil has to lose. We need to draw the lines really easily and obviously so we can distinguish who we should be rooting for. I love that Tolkien does this, and I was happy to read a book that even though the good guys were flawed, like all of us, we ultimately know what the goal is and where we were going. Bravo! Brava! I don't know why I ended it with bravo. Oh, golly. There you go. That is my, noob review of the first Lord of the Rings book. Haven't read any more. Probably would like to eventually. Maybe I should. But I did listen to the audiobook, which made it so much easier to read and digest for me personally. But I will say, I have gotten into more fantasy and, more complex fantasy since I read that. So maybe I would be able to handle it a bit better and it would be a bit easier. Either way, there you go. That was my random impressions of Lord of the Rings. See you in the adventures.